Mr. President, earlier in the session, I introduced Senate File 314, and what that does, and that is the amendment, Mr. President. What it does is it treats all of Minnesota in terms of deer hunting the same, both the northern part of the state and the southern part of the state. We've had in policy in Minnesota for many years a requirement that south of about around Highway 10, but it's really defined differently than Highway 10, but it's about that area. And south, if you are deer hunting, you are not allowed to use a rifle. And so what this bill does is it puts, if you're north of that line, Mr. President, you can use a rifle, you can use a shotgun, and you can use a pistol. So south of the line, you can only use a pistol and a shotgun in order to harvest deer during deer season. So what this would provide is uniformity throughout the state, and that is the bill represented in the amendment. And I will mention to members that this issue was discussed last session. As a matter of fact, it was part of the DNR policy bill. It was section 15 of their bill in the Senate bill in 2022. I talked to the DNR yesterday, and they still have the same sentiment on the bill in terms of doing it, but it wasn't in this year's policy bill that they did bring forward. I can also mention that as you look at this change, some people will initially point to and say, well, you know, it must be different because, you know, rifles must not be safe or something. Why would they not have rifles included in southern Minnesota? As a matter of fact, as we talk to people, Mr. President, and the history of it, the reason that it was limited to shotguns originally, and pistols I think were added later, handguns, is that originally it was used as a deer management tool to limit the amount of harvest that happened. Deer shotguns back then didn't have the efficacy and the technology that they do today. And so in Minnesota, it was used to actually provide for less harvesting of deer in southern Minnesota. Since then, of course, things have changed. We have an overpopulation problem of deer in a number of parts of southern Minnesota, certainly in the southeastern part of the state. We have chronic wasting disease, which has manifested itself, Mr. President, because of the high concentration of deer in many of these areas. So add to that, if you will, Mr. President and members, the fact that less and less deer hunters take to the woods every year. As a matter of fact, in Minnesota, I know I've read it's less than 12% nationwide, getting down in the 6% range of the population that hunts today. Much, much less than it used to be. So those are just kind of some of the outlines, if you will. For those interested in more discussion about the safety of rifles, a number of years ago, or actually maybe only 3 years ago, asked some staff to help me look throughout the country and see if anybody had done any research about the safety parameters during deer hunting of shotguns versus rifles. As a matter of fact, there is one study. It's a pretty extensive study commissioned by the Assembly in the state of Pennsylvania. And if you'll indulge me, members, I'm going to read just a little bit. I don't want to violate any rules here, but the results of the study said that shotguns firing modern saboted slugs have a larger danger area than the .30-06 rifle when the angle of elevation is approximately level at 0 degrees. So when you are in a deer hunting type of situation, they found rifles to be actually safer than shotguns, and certainly muzzle loaders were the safest of all three of those. Also, as we look at safety statistics, Mr. President, the state of Wisconsin, which is where I hunt. I grew up in the state of Wisconsin. Our family farm is there. My brothers and friends and I hunt every year, and we hunt hard. And if you look at both the hunting incident statistics and the fatality statistics during deer season. Precipitous drop from way back when it was the highest, which was back in the 1960s, 1965-ish. It was up above 250 incidences. Today, Mr. President, it's down around 10 or 12 incidences in the state of Wisconsin and has declined at that same rate really through the time during which they converted. Because, Mr. President, when I was a young kid, 12 years old, actually when I was 8 or 10, I carried a stick in the woods during deer hunting. That's all you could get. During that time, Wisconsin was a shotgun-only state. The entire state was shotgun-only. It converted to the same type of policy we have in northern Minnesota now, and the same type of policy that we're seeking in this amendment back during the last 2 decades. So, again, the increase in safety experienced in Wisconsin has continued at the very same rate or same steepness to the slope headed down on the line, if you will, over that time. So that's the amendment, Mr. President. I encourage people to support the amendment. The DNR, as I mentioned, supports this policy. The Minnesota Deer Hunters Association also supports the policy. I'd like to thank the co-authors on my bill. I know Senator Kupek and Senator Wiesenberg, Senator Barr, and Senator Green on Senate File 314. Thank you, Mr. President.